Hello and welcome to episode 259 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans Weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and if you listened last week, you probably figured out what the topic is today. We're talking about wrong fantasy. We are talking.
You did that last week.
I think I did too. Yeah. Was it a joke both times, or one time, or neither time? The guess is yours. But we are talking about Phantasy Star IV, the end of the millennium. Again this week to talk about the end game, maybe some overall themes, maybe a little bit more about the development history and music and stuff we didn't get into in the first episode. And joining me today is the same panel as last time, starting with Alana Hagues.
Hi, everyone.
And Mark Tjan.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going okay. You know, I've been better. But we're recording episode 259, and that about a game that I, truthfully, I really liked. Like, I was a little apprehensive about playing a big Genesis RPG on a weird 3-button controller, but it ended up just fine. Alana, this was also your first time playing Phantasy Star IV. Let's have you and I give our sort of, what was your reaction to sort of the end game overall impression, abridged version?
Do you know, I wish I'd played it on a Mega Drive now, because that 3-button, you describing the Mega Drive controller is such a throwback to me. That thing is so cool. But yeah, this was my first time, and I mean, the game overall is pretty consistent throughout. Like, I was on a pretty consistent high from the beginning to end with, like, no real hiccups. I truly love this game. I've come out of it on a bit of a high because, and this may come from my biases, like growing up with this console, like there's just something about the Sega Mega Drive that I love, and I don't think you'll ever be able to take it out of me. And I think Phantasy Star really kind of brought all that out for me. Like, there's some really cool moments. It's kind of edgy at times. It's kind of lighthearted at times, and I think it balances everything really well. And yeah, I don't really have too many bad things to say, but I'm sure we'll get into the finer details as we go along.
Right, and I'm from a similar position to you, as that I really, really liked this game and came out overall with a very positive impression. But unlike you, I don't really have any Genesis Mega Drive nostalgia at all, and like playing this on the Genesis Mini, which is a great little machine, honestly. I've had a lot of fun even just watching the like opening demos in that thing, and then listening to the menu music.
Oh yeah, Kashiro.
Yeah. No joke, listening to the menu music of that thing was almost worth the $33 I paid.
Would it have been better if you'd had that giant controller from E3 though?
Maybe. That was like trying to figure out Streets of Rage 2 on that was amusing. That was Cody and I, Cody from the news team, trying that
Corey.
out. Corey, right. Oh man, I just can't get. That's not the first time I'm going to mix up someone's name in this episode because there's a lot of four-letter characters that we deal with in the second half. Sorry, Corey. But anyway, but I don't really have positive nostalgia for the Genesis / Mega Drive. In fact, if anything, I have a slight flashbacks from the old console wars. The last time I cared about the console wars was that decade, and like getting the Genesis Mini, like I waited for it to get cheap, was a little bit, I don't know, like walking behind enemy lines. Like I'm like, oh, this is like it was completely different and foreign to me, from the weird 3-button controller to the unusual bass and all the soundtracks to the I don't know, if there's one thing I would say about Genesis games is that they're consistently really emotively animated to the point of almost seeming over animated because I'm used to SNES sprites. But I got comfortable with Phantasy Star IV like very shortly after starting it, and it was just consistently fun and interesting right through the end, and I'm very, very satisfied. This is an excellent RPG of its era, and if it was a Super Nintendo game, I would probably count it highly among Super Nintendo games. But
it's interesting. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, actually, you brought up sprite work, and I was just thinking on the fly, like, how, like, Super Nintendo sprites are so expressive. Like, I can think of Chrono Trigger's expressions in Final Fantasy VI, you know, when, like, Locke's like, oh, no, I'm a treasure hunter. But then in Phantasy Star, you've got, like, the sprite models themselves on the map and on screen outside of battle are, like, fairly inexpressive, but then you've got all those panels and that. So it's got a really different presentation style as well, which makes it really unique. I think that's cool.
I always think that it looks a bit... a bit like the UK run on Transformers, because it's got like an almost grittier feel to it. Yeah, just a lot more, in a way, a more mature and sophisticated art style to the enemies and to the characters when you're in battle and things like that I don't think you see as often with SNES work.
Calling Genesis mature and sophisticated and versus what's on the SNES is hard disagree, but I mean, you being a Sega kid growing up, I guess that would make sense. But like when I was thinking of the heavily animated things, like, I was thinking of things like Earthworm Jim or Comic Zone that just had very stylized sprites with a ton of frames. And like,
even Sonic the Hedgehog, like the wobbling animations and stuff like that.
But I think that maybe just the mostly Square or Enix RPGs I played on the SNES have like good looking sprites that are made with maybe fewer frames of animation than what I saw in battles on Phantasy Star IV. It's a good RPG that has, I think, themes and ideas and gameplay that fit its time and is overall a strong package. But let's go into the story a little bit, because we stopped talking right before one of the big twists of the character Rune visits the Esper Manor, of which another character, Kyra, is a resident, and the great sage Lutz that's been alive for 1,000 years actually is Rune. because Lutz, the original Lutz from 1,000 years ago, preserved his memories in some kind of AI or some kind of repository, and he, the original Lutz, has had a series of inheritors or sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Not really proteges, but
descendants.
I mean, are we sure that they're blood descendants though?
I don't think they are. They're essentially doing the Dread Pirate Roberts thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But with passing on a spiritual power, I guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Or a spiritual power held by technology, because Rune, I'm still not sure how Rune was able to travel between Motavia and Azolis without the use of a spaceship, or at least with a spaceship unknown to us. And they mentioned that he's the 5th generation Lutz, which means maybe he's been around for a few hundred years. If 5 Lutzes ago was 1,000 years ago. So Rune isn't exactly Lutz, but he holds the mantle of Lutz, which is very important, and which means Rune is, like they were hinting at it before, but he's definitely privy to knowledge outside the rest of the party, and is at least aware of some of what the dark force or profound darkness is. After Rune sort of touches the Lutz ball or whatever it is, and knows and is aware of where they have to go next, they go to Gremios Temple, which is the original temple where the best character used to work at. Why? Raja. That's I told you I was going to forget names this whole podcast. Raja's old home, Gremios Temple. But right when they're trying to negotiate taking the torch from the temple to burn down the trees to get to Garbrick Tower to stop the plague and the snowstorm, since we're starting to get into layers of plot here, 3 masked men steal the torch and go off to somewhere called Air Castle. And I think if you've played previous Phantasy Star games, you already know what Air Castle is, or maybe familiar with it.
It's Phantasy Star 1, isn't it? Yeah,
it's Phantasy Star 1. It is actually the most frustrating dungeon in Phantasy Star 1, because in that game, Air Castle is presented like all dungeons in that pseudo 3D perspective as you go down hallways.
First person,
And you can't see things to the side of you, like they're always the same tiles, unless it's a hallway. There's a door you need to find in the Air Castle, which means you have to procedurally go through part of the map, turning to look right or left the entire time, tile by tile, or you will not find it. And even hearing the Air Castle mentioned in this one just gave me horrible flashbacks to that.
I bet, and the music and everything. I mean, obviously you go to Air Castle by way of ship, but I believe the map is 1-to-1 with the original Phantasy Star, I think. I believe Stephen Meyerink brought this up on an episode of Rhythm Encounter. That dungeon is specifically made to match the original map in the original game, but obviously it's probably still the most frustrating dungeon in Phantasy Star 4. It's very, very long. It's not there's longer dungeons in other games, but like this is the one that I spent the most time in, and it's just a bit windy. But
given like how Phantasy Star dungeons love to have dead ends, it's just like now I have to fight like 3 random encounters just to get out of this cul-de-sac.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of affection for 16-bit first-person dungeons. That makes me think of games like Arcana, which is not an episode of Retro Encounter that's going to happen anytime soon, let me tell you.
I'm going to add it to the list.
And this was a little bit weird and difficult, and had a lot of winding corridors that kind of all look the same, whether you're just inside the castle or on one of the ramparts of the castle. And navigating a unforgiving first-person version of that seems like a nightmare. So,
and it almost was. That was the thing. They were going to put 3D dungeons in this, and then budget and time was like, no, sorry, we can't do that. And I'm like, blessings in disguise, guys.
Oh, Jesus, yeah. I mean, I accidentally warped out of Air Castle twice as well before I hit the boss, the mid-boss. So I had to run the dungeon 3 times. Which is fine, like I leveled up enough and I was over-leveled as a result. But I think one of the more annoying things about this is you've got Kyra at this point, which is fine, she can do skill heals and things, but you don't have Raja, who has a ton of TP and all the best spells and has the utility to do it, whereas Rika, who has, I think she has Gires and stuff, or what's it called, Gisar at this point, like she burns out of them TP so quickly that
and you don't have Miracle or anything.
I think Raja and Rika basically have all of the same healing techs, but Raja has way more way more TP and a bunch of healing skills that supplement those. So like Kira is a little bit more offense because she can use those all hitting slasher moves, which are pretty okay, but it's nothing compared to the healing battery that Raja is. So and also Rika's a pretty good offensive attacker, and having her heal a lot means she's attacking less, which is a bit of a bummer. So not my favorite party going through Air Castle, and on top of that, the enemies I think are moderate difficulty. But the most annoying part is navigating it, and the second most annoying part is those 3 masked guys that stole the torch as a mid-boss, because they burn you with a really strong all-hitting attack until you kill one of them. And this is another one of those boss fights that I did do successfully, but I had one character dead at the end because I just couldn't handle their offense for 2 turns or however long it took me to kill one of them. I don't remember who it was because I beat this game about a week ago by now. I think it was Rune, but I don't 100% remember. But it was as far as the boss fights in this game go, on the challenging side.
Yeah, one of the harder ones, definitely. And there is a healing point halfway through this dungeon, which is good. And I died a few times to it, but like I was lucky because I'm playing it on the PS4. You do have like a quick save option, so I could just, if I thought I was going to fail or I thought nope, this isn't going well, I just did quick load and I could redo it straight away. Whereas if you don't, like you can save anywhere on the world map in this game, but you cannot save in dungeons. Yeah. So you'd have to redo the entire thing. So I can only imagine how much harder it would have been, had. Yeah.
I think Air Castle is definitely like the boss fight. Is where I learned to absolutely abuse team-up attacks, because by that point I had remembered that Grand Cross exists.
Yeah.
And you just spam that on one of them, and it's like, okay, get this guy dead as fast as possible, or we're screwed.
I didn't use combos a lot of the game, but I did use Grand Cross as soon as as soon as Rune got a couple uses of his of that holy spell. Is it like Highness or Hires?
FS.
That was it, yeah. I was confusing it with his wind spell, which has an equally nonsensical name.
Yes.
I think that one starts. I think that one starts with an H.
Don't worry, it's pronounced Tandale, not Tandle, but they never tell you that.
Oh. Why?
Because Phantasy Star loves nonsense names.
I mean, it's space, so it has to be nonsense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Well, whatever. I don't think I was using. I think I only had like 1 or 2 uses of FS when I was going through this, so I didn't really start using those combos until 1 or 2 dungeons after this. But the combo system is. I think it's mostly discovery based. I don't think they tell you about any of them in the context of the game. But I did a couple of them by accident, just throughout the game. Like where did that attack come from? Oh, it must be some hidden thing. And then and then around when I was doing the last couple dungeons of the game, I did check a guide and saw, I can combine one of Rune's fire spell with the missile spell out of Ren and get a pretty good fire missile spell, and I used a bunch of them when I was sort of leveling up for the final boss. But the combo and macro system, because I mean which are not exactly related, but macros are a much easier way of creating the combo you want. It's pretty interesting. A macro, I don't know if we went into it last episode, maybe we just alluded to it. Basically, it's a preset set of commands that let you choose the order in which your characters act, and then have them do those attacks in a row. But if your speed stat or your initiative roll or whatever isn't perfect, the enemies might all go ahead of you if you have a slow character at the beginning of the macro, or they might interrupt the macro and mess up your combo, because combos only occur when the appropriate skills happen consecutively perfectly. So the macro system is not perfect for the player, but it's really, really handy. And at the end of the game, I had around 7 or 8 macros.
I kind of abuse them quite a lot. Like, there's the really basic one I think that Mark brought up last episode, like the double fire one or something like that. And
I think it's fire, ice, and wind back to back to back in any order.
Right.
Gives you a nice tri-attack one.
Yeah, and I use Blizzard a lot as well. But I think I think you're right, it is discovery based most of the time. But I think the really cool thing about this, doing a little bit of digging, is that most of them have multiple combinations that you can use. Like some of them, like Grand Cross, only have one. But like Blizzard has got, like, you can use this level water spell and this dark spell, or you can use this water spell and this fire spell, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Just giving me the option to do that instead of choosing every skill individually was just great. Like, I welcome systems like this. It was really cool.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I do wish it was hinted at a bit more, I guess, in game, because like the Hunters Guild serves very little purpose except to give you your side quests. And I've always just wondered, like, why can't there just be like a tutorial guy there who gives you hints like combining this and that could make this happen? I don't know if it will, but that's up to you to find out.
I think there's a couple of those in the university town at the very beginning, but I'm not sure they tell you all about macros and combos. I think they just tell you that they exist.
Right.
Right, yeah. To do like a quick comparison to, ironically, last month's game journal, Persona 2, which you can, there's not macro system, but you can like tell the characters what order to go in, and you set up fusion spells by putting the right spells next to each other, or the right skills. Like,
isn't one of them literally called Grand Cross?
I mean, the one that uses all the ultimate skills of the ultimate personas is, and I got in a pretty lengthy discussion about that. But it's really interesting comparing it, because Phantasy Star IV's like macro system is really good. Like you said, you can have like 7 or 8 different combos all set up, whereas with Persona 2 you have to go in and change it every single time if you want to do a different, like, not macro, what they call fusion spell every time. So it's like, it's interesting that something from 1993 does this better than something in 1998. They're unfair comparisons, but it was just, I was amused basically when I saw combo skills and macros and like setting, like predetermining the order of your characters kind of thing. That was kind of interesting.
But back to Air Castle, you fight a boss at the end who I am 100% sure was also in Phantasy Star 1, since because he recognizes Rune as Lutz, and they seem to know each other. After you defeat Lashik, you get the torch from Gremio's temple. I believe Gremio's temple collapses, but the priest is all too happy to lend you the torch. And you use that to burn through those annoyingly immortal trees that were blocking Garabek Tower, and can get into Garabek Tower, which is not a tower so much as a living horror show. Right? Like the meat circus and Psychonauts or something.
It looked horrible. It reminded me of, the bit in Breath of Fire 4, which is not a meat or a tower, like, but when Nina's sister is like, you meet the character who's been turned into a fleshy monster that takes up an entire building. I love a flesh dungeon, but this was like, this was really gross.
Yeah, it was shades of like Splatterhouse and other icky games like that. Like even the treasure boxes are no longer the usual like silver or gold boxes you find. They're like these slimy, rusted over things, and it was just like, ugh. Opening doors is just like parting like flesh cobwebs. It's just like, oh no.
But like,
and
there's no explanation
also,
for it either.
and every floor looks the same except for some that are weirdly smokier than others. And so I got a little bit stuck in these, elevators that look like rib cages a couple times, and I got lost the first time I tried to go through it, but I escaped, healed, regrouped, went back in. And I never got a game over a single time playing this game, but I did have to teleport out, go back in, teleport out, go back in a couple times in a couple dungeons. Getting to the top of Garrowburg Tower is a little bit of a challenge because I think they upped the difficulty of the random encounters here, and it's a little bit confusing to navigate. And at the top of it is another Dark Force, which you might remember from a couple dungeons ago at the where did we fight the first Dark Force? It wasn't it wasn't in Nervous.
It was on
the satellite. The satellite. It started with a K.
Was it Quran or Zelen?
No, the second, the first one you said. Quran.
Yeah, Quran.
Yeah. In the Quran satellite, and your characters have an understandable reaction. Wait a second. I thought we beat Dark Force, and everyone's like, "Well, I beat Dark Force 1,000 years ago. I don't know what's going on." Grand Cross definitely works on this dude, but it's a lot of darkness and lightning spells, medium challenging boss fight. At the end, your characters regroup a little bit and they get an emergency signal from Motavia. Although Dezolis does seem like that the blizzard has ended and sunshine's returned, so at least there's a small victory there. But
Roger was right.
Yeah,
the whole time.
Roger was right the whole long, and Roger got better, but it still needs some more bed rest before he can join you. And Kira returns to the Esper Manor, so you're down to a party of 4 again. You return to Motavia after the distress call. You talk to Demi. Demi can't rejoin you either. And now the game opens up a little bit because all of the side quests have unlocked at the guild, and you're given a hovercraft at the very beginning that lets you finally go over oceans and explore the rest of Motavia. Let's talk about the side quests a little bit because in the first half of the game they do unlock a couple. If you go to the guild town Aido and visit the guild, they give you side quests that have money rewards, some more significant than others. And allow you to, get some extra materials and extra story moments. And I think some of them are among the more interesting story bits in the whole game. One of the ones in the second half of the game where you have to find 2 girls that went to the big city but didn't understand how money worked because they led a sheltered life, and you have to pay their you have to pay their bail, which is equal to your reward for the mission, which is amusing if annoying. And you meet a guy who was raising birds or rappies, which are some kind of bird rabbit things, in a nearby cave, but they're destroying the crops, which is making him ostracized within the village. But he refuses to stop the birds. So you beat up the birds. He implores you don't kill them, and he apologizes, but you get no money out of that one either. It's
so cute as well. They're called Sherpas in Phantasy Star 3, aren't they?
Okay.
They're in that game, and I think they are in most games going forward as well. Like, they definitely remember them from Phantasy Star Online at some point. So.
I sort of could feel that these were the chocobos or rabbites or traditional early enemies of a previous Phantasy Star game.
Yeah,
but they sort of gave them their own dungeon and own boss fight for Phantasy Star 4, which is nice, but that was me making some assumptions and not really having any real knowledge of it.
I just love the design of the rappies in general. Like, they are just the cute little fat chocobos that you want a plushie of, whose one attack is to look at you with their big beady eyes and do 1 damage.
Right, yeah. They really stand out as well, because, you don't really fight any normal, organic animal, mammal, bird, anything. For the rest of the game, it's, aliens and big bugs and even bigger bugs and
robots and shadow
robots.
knights.
Yeah, and now you just got these little birds, which I think are really cool. The side quests are really cool. Some of the early ones, there were really stupid ones. You have to go and save someone's dog, and you have to go and buy this particular pastry to go and get it out from somewhere. Or
I couldn't find that pastry. I had to check a guide for it. It was it's in a bakery that's off of the map in one town.
Yeah, you have to go like round the side of it, and it's
Yeah.
like, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the one where you have to. Oh, there's something with like a boy goes down a hole to try and do something, and he's been swallowed up by a big snail, and oh no, it's just. Yeah, there's some cool references to previous games as well, like the Rappy quest, and I think one of them.
The last
refers,
one, the last one is definitely a reference because it's about it's one of those tech facility dungeons, which are honestly my favorite kind of dungeon in this game because they have the coolest music and and feel a little bit less monotonous than the big caves or whatever the hell you want to call Garberg Tower. But this one was called Valhall Fort, which I think was a location from a previous Phantasy Star game. It has all of Ren's best equipment in it, so that makes it worth checking out immediately. And I think it's also Demi's best equipment, but because the androids share a lot of the same materials. But at the end, you meet an AI named Daughter, and you get some backstory that there was an AI named Mother, which seems like a villain from a previous Phantasy Star, but I don't know for
Mother
sure.
Brain.
Mother Brain
Okay.
from Phantasy Star 2.
Ah,
Yeah.
Phantasy Star 2, starring Samus from Metroid,
Yes.
Yes.
and Robo from Chrono Trigger, which in the future. But anyway, so they mentioned that there was a Daughter project where they sort of created a new AI to hopefully take over the maintenance of all of Motavia's systems, but the project was shelved. Daughter is sort of incomplete, she's an incomplete prototype, which she's not aware of. So when Ren tells her this in his very matter-of-fact, emotionless manner, Daughter does not react well and sends some robots after you, which aren't hard if you because you have a couple really powerful electricity spells by now out of Rune and Ren. But it's weirdly tragic, where you basically confront an AI with an uncomfortable truth, and she reacts very defensively. I say she only because she's called Daughter, and she like begs not to be turned off, but you sort of have to turn her off. And it was like, oh, this was an unexpectedly dark, bittersweet end to this side quest.
Yeah.
At least I got 80,000 Phantasy Star money out of it.
So funny about that, you do not actually have to go to the guild to start this one. You can do this. This last quest can be done pro bono, and in sort of PS4 community, like fandom communities around the years, it's seen as the morally correct thing to do is to not take the reward version of this because Daughter was just so resonant.
I am making the morally incorrect decision because 80,000 Meseta is worth 8 star dues, and I care much more about 8 star dues than making the morally right decision in a game that doesn't have a morality system.
Yep.
That makes sense, though. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, it is cool.
They do reflect on... Actually, they do this with all the quests, don't they? They always have, like, a little bit of dialogue when you hand the quest into the guild. They're always like, oh, what if we did the right thing? Well, this kind of stuff isn't really the best thing for us to do. And they do that with this quest as well, which is just... Yeah, it's really cool.
And after you are satisfied with exploring both of the planets and done whatever side quests and buying stuff, whatever you want to do, the next place to go to is Soldier's Temple. And you get the character with the least backstory in the whole game joining your party, Seth, who is an archaeologist or historian who proffers compliments a lot. Is maybe his biggest personality trait.
Yes, I mean this is a pretty basic dungeon to go through, and yeah, it's like every floor, isn't it? He like stops, he's like, "Oh, you're so strong," and Chaz is like a little bit unsure. Everyone else is just happy to have him along, kind of thing. They're going after something to find where. Oh,
yeah, they're going after an item that will direct them to Rykros.
Thank you.
And because Rykros is mentioned to them by the people in Gremio's temple after you take down Garberg Tower, but they're not really sure what Rykros is or what's important about it, but they know that it's the key to stopping Dark Force.
Right.
And
right.
At the end of the dungeon, I forget what the item is called, but you get an item that basically emits it's like a wand or a baton or a torch that emits a light. And after you get the item, Seth turns into Dark Force. It's unclear to me if Seth was an agent of Profound Darkness all along, or if Profound Darkness sort of reached out with an invisible tentacle and turned this innocent man into a Dark Force avatar. I am 50-50 on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think there's consensus either. Like, I don't think anyone actually knows which way it went.
Right.
And there's been a lot of fandom back and forth about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel
totally
like
understandable.
Yeah, I feel like it's just very random. It does kind of like hammer home that Dark Force is kind of everywhere now, and it's just he's been buried away and hidden away in a couple of dungeons, but this one it's like it can literally be a person now, kind of thing. So it's like
kind of an
serious.
Agent Smith situation where the Matrix can turn any person connected to the Matrix into an Agent Smith.
But they're about to explain it anyway. As soon as we get into the Profound Darkness stuff, so
right.
That's right, yeah.
But
I mean,
you learn it very soon once you get to Rykros.
Yeah, I was going to say that fight as well was kind of difficult. At least that one you can save before.
Mm-hmm.
But the annoying thing is you've only got 4 party members, and you've only got 4 party members for a while, and like... And it's just, this version of Dark Force does more damage than the rest of them because it's more physically based, so, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
it was a little bit annoying.
And you might not expect it, because you go into the temple, and Seth, as an archaeologist, wanted to check out the temple, was his whole reason for his whole reason for accompanying you. And then you get the item and you leave the temple. It doesn't feel like a boss fight. Like there's no. I mean, as RPG players, we're used to seeing, oh, okay, the hallway's opening up. Oh, okay, this feels like the end of the area. Like
like every boss before it, you've had like a bit of dialogue to go. Like, oh no, I can feel some energy from here or something. Or you've seen like Dark Forces sprite in the background. But this one's just like, you leave the temple and there's a cutscene, and oh no, the man's exploding, and oh no, it's Dark Force. Oops.
And it's, I think I thought it was maybe a little harder than the one in Garrobark Tower. It's not as long a dungeon to deal with before fighting it, but it's like you said, it deals more damage. You only have 4 party members. I mean, they're the best 4 non-Raja party members, so it's still you're still all right. But after this, like. You get the idea that there isn't one Dark Force. Dark Force probably won't die until you learn the secret behind it, and then you go back to the space station. You realize that the item you got from the Soldier's Temple. I apologize, I forget what it's called because my memory.
It's the Arrow Prism.
Right.
Ah, that's it.
And basically you do some triangulating. Ren does his thing, and you understand that the Arrow Prism is directing that beam of light to a completely undetectable 4th planet in the Algol System. Mm. And so you fly out there, and Rykros is that planet. Like Rykros was a vague concept before, and now it's a planet, and on this planet is the secret to defeating Dark Force.
Yep.
And the caretaker of Rykros wants to test you before divulging his secrets to you. You have to go visit 2 towers, the Tower of Courage and the Tower of Strength. They're 2 medium-sized dungeons that have a bunch of good end-game equipment in them, so you definitely want to check these towers out. Mm-hmm. And annoyingly, I mentioned this before, but annoyingly the bosses are light elementals, so a few of your light skills won't really work on them, including Grand Cross.
Yep.
If you did the weapons facility earlier on, though, you should have a couple of good skills for Ren, and that's really where you want to go, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you want to. I think one of the bosses is more magic focused, and one is more physical focused. But using your best attacks that aren't light attacks will basically get the job done, and it helps to. I'm not sure if because the Silver Tusk item for Rika is light elemental, and it's really awesome the whole game because almost everything is weak against light by the end of the game. But I'm not sure if that affected her in this dungeon or not, because I think she was still doing okay damage for me, and I never unequipped that thing.
She was always my highest level as well. Like, I don't know whether she's just got a higher level, like, growth, or whether she just died less than everybody else. But yeah, she was like,
I think for me
she was
it's
like
both.
4 levels ahead of everyone.
Yeah,
I think
her
for me it's
growth
both.
pattern is faster.
And she has a higher growth rate, and she has good defenses and good HP, which makes her just more survivable in general. Again, she was my favorite character consistently, both from a personality and skill set, and like efficacy rating. But anyway, those bosses are weak against light, but they weren't that difficult. And after you defeat those, the guy in the middle temple of Rykros tells you all about profound darkness, which is basically the Algol system was created in a battle between the profound darkness and the great light, which the great light won and sealed away the profound darkness.
Yeah.
And the great light created the Algol system and everything that existed there, and then left, presumably, to another star system.
Just hecked off. And, like, Chaz's
Peaced
reaction to that was my reaction. It's like, wait a minute. I have to fight for some jerk who just, like, decided to go away? Like,
Pretty
why?
much.
What?
Yeah.
Who is this guy?
Yeah. Chaz has a moment of, I don't know, a moment of clarity or a moment of personality, you could even say, because he doesn't have a ton of personality for most of the game. But he basically just he expresses anger like Mark said. Why am I fighting for some absentee god that doesn't care about its creation and has abandoned us? Why should we be fighting in its name when it has done nothing for us for thousands of years? And
Right.
and Rune talks him down a little bit and directs him to the holy sword that has been set aside for the hero of legend. Chaz picks it up. It's called the Alcidion, and has visions of every previous Phantasy Star hero, all of the chosen ones from 1,000 years ago and 2,000 years ago. If you're a Phantasy Star player, this is probably really cool. But for me, it was like, I was like, oh, look at all this anime hair. That's
It's-
It's still,
They
it's still
don't-
cool.
it is.
Yeah, they don't include Phantasy Star 3.
No, they don't, do they?
No.
Because
they
Phantasy Star
don't.
3 was not one of those 1,000-year conflicts. It was in between 2 and 4.
It's true, yeah.
Yeah.
But also because it was made by a separate team, and it always reads a little bit of, like, shade of, you took this project away from us, and now we have it back.
Yeah, it's kind of a spin-off, isn't it, in a way? It happens tangentially to the other
Yeah.
games, and
Yeah,
it's like...
it's the dawn of East of Phantasy Star, sure.
Yes.
But after you learn about Profound Darkness, you return to Motavia, and every character that you had the whole game minus Alice basically joins you in the space launch hub, and you have your choice of 5th characters for the end game. And I naturally chose Raja. But it's cool that you have your and Alana, this is a bit of a Skies of Arcadia moment. Like, oh, we're at the end. We have our core characters, but we get to choose our final one.
Yeah, very
It's not
much
bad.
so. I did the same as you. I picked Roger, I guess, because then you've kind of got Rika for extra damage consistently, haven't you?
And for casting
Roger...
Saner.
Yeah, and for casting Scent Fire, if that's what it's called.
Yeah, Saint Fire.
Roger's like magic spell. But yeah, like
Yep, it's a good holy spell. I think it's about the same as FS, except I think Rune has higher magic damage in general.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. But yeah, like it is a really cool moment that like they just dump it. I like the way everybody just kind of turns up, like Kyra and Raja accompany you back on the ship, and then everybody else is just like, yeah, we're here now, and I was like, oh, that's nice.
It's like, oh, Han, you showed up, huh?
Right? Yeah.
Hey, Raja, you want to come along?
Yeah, definitely.
I would have preferred that Han's girlfriend join us instead of Han.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's cool.
I do love...
She's cool, he's annoying. Saya, that's her name.
Yeah. I love going back to her classroom and reading all the books, by the way. Just like all the Golden Axe adventure coloring book or whatever they have in the bookshelves.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
She sounds like the best elementary school teacher ever.
Oh, right?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Oh my god.
But then we have the extra tower.
Right, the Tower of, is it Rage?
Yes, anger.
Wrath?
Anger, rage,
Anger. I think it's anger, yeah. And that one, there's a little bit more endgame equipment in it. It's a lot like the Towers of Courage and Strength, but at the end is a Phantom of Alice, which you defeat quickly, and Chaz has a moment where he just fumes to himself. But then a spirit similar to the bosses in the previous towers appears and asks Chaz, "Hey, do you want the power of rage? Do you want to be able to kill anything you want with your own strength?" And the correct answer to that is no.
Yeah.
Because the key to strength is letting go of your anger and doing doing what you need to do with a clear mind. And if Chaz communicates that to this phantom fella, then he gives you the ultimate one of the ultimate spells, Megid, which is definitely the same root as Megiddo from the SMT games. It's
Yeah.
I believe it's
some folkloric background.
I think it's a biblical term originally because it's an actual
Right.
valley somewhere.
Probably. Yeah, I've heard of it before. Yeah. I mean, that fight's only Chaz, but it's pretty easy, isn't it?
No,
Like,
I mean, it's the fight itself is trivial, but making sure to tell the Phantom no and not yes, and letting go of your anger and grief, and doing what's right is the important decision. But I mean that Migid spell was definitely a factor in the final battle. It's strong as hell.
Oh yeah, the final boss can use it as well, right back at you.
Yes.
Yep. I actually have a fun little side story to this. So I didn't do the Tower of Anger originally because it's optional, and I didn't know for years that it existed. But I would look up sprites from Phantasy Star IV on the Spriters resource, and I was always confused. Where is Alice's enemy sprite used?
Yeah.
And I eventually just broke down and read a guide and did it myself, but it's so strange to be fighting Alice for the 5 minutes that you do. And
it's a really cool it's a really cool moment actually.
Yeah.
It's really it's one of the few times where the game uses in-game engine and surface dialogue to communicate a big plot point instead of one of those manga style cutscenes.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is interesting, because they could have made a cool cutscene out of that.
Yep.
But instead
Maybe because it was a side quest, I don't know.
Maybe they ran out of budget, maybe it was just a side quest, maybe they just wanted it to be sort of about Chaz and about the fight, and maybe not have to make another one of those. Mm-hmm. But the end result is you get a moment with Chaz grieving at the loss of Alice again, and a powerful spell. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely a cool optional moment. I was checking a non-spoiler guide for most of the second half of this because I wanted to make sure to beat the game in time for the podcast. But also this is the point in the game where I had struggled a little bit at the end. I think I had Rika at level 40 and everyone else in the 35 to 37 range when I unlocked the Battle for Profound Darkness, and I decided I'm just going to sit down and level up a bunch. So I threw on a podcast and got I think Rika to 47, Chaz to 45, before going to take on Profound Darkness. I think Rika was 48. Chaz
I was
45.
low to mid 40s. That sounds about right.
I basically had everyone gain 5 to 6 levels just before the final fight, and the final fight was easy for me. But I'm sure if the challenge level would be more reasonable, or at least higher, if I had gone straight there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can we talk about this final dungeon? Because
it is psychedelic.
Yep.
I mean, it hurt my head.
It is every Earthbound background as a stage.
Oh my god, it is Foreside, isn't it? Literally.
Yeah.
And has invisible
without
floors
buildings
that are barely visible until you're right near them. So it can be a little bit frustrating to navigate. It doesn't have a lot of treasure, but it does have dead ends and some confusing moments.
I didn't find it too frustrating to get through, actually. I managed to get through it pretty easily. But
it's hard to look at.
Yeah, it's very hard to look at.
The layout of it.
About people. Yeah, I'm concerned for people who have suffer from photosensitivity and things like that, because that's not an easy. I'm not sure.
The layout wasn't very unfriendly, but the visuals of it. I mean, like you said, someone that's photosensitive or has difficulty parsing, different layers in things, 16-bit games don't always have great transparency layers. Mm-hmm. So if you struggle with visibility on those, this would be bad too. Some of the smoky areas in Garroburg Tower might be like that too.
Yeah.
So the final boss, Profound Darkness, goes through a couple of profound transformations. I'm not sure what they all mean necessarily, but it's mostly just a twisted abomination-style final boss that we've all seen before. But it's cool that it's multi-stage and escalating at least. It brought the drama as a final boss.
Mm-hmm. I think what I love about it is that, well, first of all, it starts off as sort of like the dogs from the Thing amalgamation, where it's just multiple heads and teeth and eyes and goo, and then becomes more armored as time goes on. But the thing that struck me was this is sort of an inversion of what Square Enix tends to do with its bosses, where you go from human to kind of all out I guess, transcendent deity monster thing. And this one got more human as time went on.
Yeah, it does. It becomes like a female, like a typical female body with, everything out kind of thing, and yeah.
And the biggest shoulder pads, like just these shoulder plates that could eat God.
It's the 90s.
Yeah.
It's not too difficult. Again, I think I was around the same level as you, Mike. And yeah, I had the macro set up for like, what's that? There's like an ultimate spell where you use the main 4 characters like best skills, and it does like I think it's 9999 or 999 damage, and that shaved off a considerable amount of the last 4.
That's like Mega Destruct or something.
Something like that. Yeah, I think it's Meggy something else.
I did see that skill in the list when I was doing a little bit of side research, but I sort of just stuck to my single target attacks, Grand Cross, so I could have characters heal or boost or repair themselves in Ren's case when they needed to. But sticking to, I mean, I use the same strategy for most of the boss fights, just a turn to boost, and then using your best attacks while intermittently healing and taking mind of things like androids have to heal themselves or use repair kits. They're like once you sort of figure out a strategy, there isn't a lot of unique strategy to apply in this game. It's nothing like I wouldn't call any of the bosses gimmick encounters or needing or even a puzzle that you have to solve before beating them.
Yeah, it's very straightforward.
There's weird elements to it, like just how unusual some of the spells are, and how I think there's 7 or 8 elemental attacks that they don't tell you about. But overall, the boss encounters and the combat in this game, while it wasn't that interesting at a mechanical level, it's mostly fun, and it never felt like it was betraying you. Like you were always at least at the level of your enemies, and there's a lot of fun macros and combos to play around with. It was a slightly easy final encounter, but it was a cool final encounter, and they give you a lot of toys to play with by the time your characters are leveled into the 40s.
And that music.
Yeah.
The music was so good.
The final boss music is good.
Yeah. I mean, all the music's good. I think I touched on it earlier, but like the Air Castle dungeon music. There's another dungeon as well. I think it's one of the plants that you go to earlier in the game. I think it might be the one you get Rika from, actually.
The bioplant?
Yeah, the music's rearranged from the original Phantasy Star, so there's a couple of like musical throwbacks. But I really, really love this soundtrack so much. Yeah, it's so of its time.
I really like the tech facility dungeons. Like part of the aesthetic of this game is advanced technology facilities and spaceships in a backdrop of barren, almost post-apocalyptic planets.
Yeah.
So things like the bioplant, the tectonic facility, the weapons facility, and Valhalla Fort were just a really cool look and feel to those dungeons. They were my favorites.
Yeah.
It really effectively blends fantasy and sci-fi. Like, I don't think anything else has ever... You get, like, RPGs that are like, oh, we're sci-fi RPGs, not absolutely side-eyeing Star Ocean at all here. Like,
Star Ocean tells you they're a sci-fi RPG, but then it just becomes a normal, Fantasy Planet RPG.
Yeah, just sticks you on a mud rock and gives you a sword.
Pretty much, yeah. But this does the same. Like, you've got swords and things, but not only have you got swords, like they're laser swords at certain points, and you've got boomerangs that have got lasers, and you've got claws, and there's guns, and you've got a mage with you who uses a staff. So but it really effectively blends it because, like, all of these planets are kind of withering away. Like, it's post. The end of Phantasy Star II, which I'm going to spoil, Palma gets destroyed, and essentially, like, everything is reset. And now, 1,000 years later, everything else is struggling again. So, like, Matavia they're trying to regrow, but, like, the plants and everything, but they're not doing too great. So it's got this, like, they're trying to rebuild some kind of, like, utopia, I suppose.
And also, LaRouf tells you that the seal on Profound Darkness were the 3 planets in the Algol system, and
Yeah.
the combination of Parma being gone
Yeah.
and the 1,000-year weakening of the barrier that happens is the opening that Profound Darkness needed for all of the bad things happening in Phantasy Star IV, starting with everything Zio did in the first half of the game.
I really love that is like the background for why you encounter Dark Force so many times. Like not only has Dark Force been in the past sort of like a symbol of the weakening of the seal, but now it's so weak that he can turn up multiple times. Whereas like in the past it was like, once in 1,000 years he turns up. It's a problem, sure, but get the heroes together, he's done. Now it's like, no. This is a problem several times bigger. And
they basically justify Dark Force's existence by saying he's the agent or the avatar of something bigger, and because this is the best opening that Profound Darkness has ever had, Dark Force can revive and reload and attack again, again like 3 times over the course of a few hours.
Yeah,
of
exactly.
gameplay. So it recontextualizes Dark Force in a way that is, I think, pretty cool. Like it makes the conflict in Phantasy Star 1 and 2 maybe seem a little bit more trivial than what's going on here, because again, like this is the end of the millennium. This is the cap off to that story, I guess, or the Great Light versus Profound Darkness story. But it adds weight to the final conflict and is cool. Like Profound Darkness feels like a genuine threat at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really see many series like kind of embrace their history as well as Phantasy Star IV does. Like, I think we discussed this last episode, right? We said, like, I don't think it feels overwhelming. As somebody who's never played Phantasy Star 1 or 2 or 3, like, I don't feel like I'm missing out on tons, but I can see, like, the references. And, like, I mean, Rika herself is a reference to, is it Nay, in Phantasy Star 2, who is a Newman as well. And, like, there are things that you can pick up on, and you can tell that there's, like, this great sense of millennium history, like from 1,000 years ago and things, but like it does it really well, and it does it, and we talked about how it's delivered in game, and like I don't think I've really, like, other games can do it, but they do it in a way that makes you feel like you have to have experienced them or played them or read extensive Wikipedia articles on or something like that. This is just kind of like, it really celebrates the entire series. Like, even if Phantasy Star 3 is kind of to the side kind of thing. Like, I read an article, I think it was on Kotaku or somewhere, where someone was saying, like, this is, like, one of the best examples of utopia being realized, or trying to build up utopia and acknowledging this kind of, like, where the previous games had been, like, in better situations or in worse situations. And, like, it really hammered home to me, like, yeah, this is a really great way of, like, celebrating the entire series rather than just being like, oh, I'm going to pluck 1 or 2 themes out of your previous game, or, oh, it's a direct continuation, you have to have played Digital Devil Saga 1 or something like that.
I was thinking specifically of the Kiseki Trails series. If you jump in on Trails of Cold Steel 2, which I finished a couple months ago, you will be completely lost if you know nothing about Cold Steel 1 or Sky or the or Crossbell.
I mean, if you jump into Cold Steel 4 next week, kids, I highly recommend you don't.
and if you play Dragon Quest 5 or 6, like when you get to the Zenithia stuff, it like you might be aware that Zenithia was in previous games and that there's a shared legacy here, but those worlds don't even resemble each other, and they feel like completely standalone games that have magically the same floating castle in them. But Phantasy Star 4 is good on its own, but it very openly acknowledges all 3 of its predecessors and celebrates them, and gives you a little bit of an explainer or a little bit of a post-mortem on them to put everything happening in Persona in a Phantasy Star 4 in context. I'm just getting every name wrong today. I don't know what this is about. But so it's a good version of a sequel that is, that takes advantage of storytelling techniques to create a setting that feels bigger than it is. Like, there is the world of Phantasy Star is bigger than just Phantasy Star 4, and you can feel the size and impact and lineage of it, even if you haven't played the previous ones like me.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
This was a futuristic RPG that made 16, 17 years ago, But I feel like it held up. Like, me having no background with the Genesis, no background with Phantasy Star, I really enjoyed this thing, and it made me at least Phantasy Star curious, and definitely more interested in going to my Genesis Mini and listening to that Yuzo Koshiro menu track a lot again.
Hell yeah, yeah. I mean, like, a bunch of people on this game. Like, there's some pretty hefty names.
Yeah.
Well, there's one very hefty name on there, but there's a couple. Like, everybody has sort of gone off to do other Sega projects. Like,
You're talking about that producer lady who has like 8 credits in the final staff role.
One R Kodama, yeah?
Who is R Kodama?
Well, Phoenix Ray, yeah. Which is fun because like she started off at Sega as like a graphic designer for like Alex Kidd, the original Phantasy Star, Altered Beast, and Sonic 1 and 2. And then like I think Phantasy Star 4 was her first director's effort, and Jesus, that's a pretty good first director's effort. And then she went on to direct Magic Knight Rayearth, which is maybe less said of the better. I'm not sure what the consensus is on it.
People
I
like that
MK.
game. I remember when I was when I was perusing very sketchy emulation and ROM sites like 15 years ago. People were trying to sell others on the Magic Knight Rayearth game.
Yeah, it's not great. I've played it. It
has its fans,
but it's definitely not bad. It's not a bad game.
Okay, yeah. All right. But yeah, like I think the main thing's really like she goes on to be a producer for like my favorite video game of all time, obviously, which I won't name for reasons, but you can see like there are things in Phantasy Star 4 that I noticed, and like you brought up Skies of Arcadia's like party system at the end, where you know everybody you've been with comes back at the end and you pick who you want to take with you, and there's lots of shared DNA between those two games that I spotted. Like, you know, you've got the vehicle segment, you've got like the kind of rebellious adventurous spirit and things like that. Like there's so many little things in there that Reiko took.
I think also like the shared optimism of the cast.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, there's just like a general positivity and a warmth that all the cast members have. You know, despite Rune and Chaz going at each other, that you can definitely see.
Friendly rivalry is good because Skies has that as well. Like, you know, Vice and Ica are always bickering with each other for some reason, but they're fine, really, for different reasons.
Maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but my favorite character to pick at the end of Skies of Arcadia is always Drachma.
Yeah, I don't think that's the worst decision ever. I think Gilda's probably the hardest one to do it with because he doesn't really have any defensive or like he's not the most defensive.
I just use Spirit Charge 75% of the time for Drachma. It's awesome.
I love Drachma.
Skies of Arcadia is great.
Yeah, it is. Shame we can't podcast about it.
We will as soon as there is a more accessible version, and I promise you that to you, Alana. And I don't mind saying that on the podcast either because
you've said it multiple times.
Yeah, it's a game I would love to play again. I played that game once in like 2003 and once in like 2006, and it was dope as hell both times. And in fact, my GameCube copy is on loan to another RPG fan staff person who I hope enjoys the game.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, Kodama also is behind the Seventh Dragon series. So,
oh yeah,
she is. So she's got a pretty hefty. I think she got a big industry award like last year, and I think it's well deserved. Like, I think it's really cool for me to have like my favorite video game was produced by a really like a positive influence in the industry, and also like at a time where like it was still kind of a boys thing.
Yeah, there aren't a ton of women in director or producer roles.
Even still,
even today. But going far back as to the mid '90s, that's impressive.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing to have.
Let's talk about what we're doing in the Retro Encounter near future. Next week is going to be, I think the episode posts on October 29th or 30th, which is very close to Halloween. So we're having a very spooky episode all about vampires to coincide with a feature about RPG vampires that I think is posting on Halloween itself. So we're going to have a very bloodthirsty final week of October on RPG Fan in general and Retro Encounter in particular. Then coming in November, we're doing an episode dedicated to Finding Paradise, the Kangao visual novel 16-bit storytelling game of which A Bird Story was a prequel to. It's the second game in the trilogy that starts with To the Moon, then Bird Story as a guide-in chapter, and then Finding Paradise as its second game in the trilogy, with the last game coming later this year. So in anticipation of that third Kangao game, we're doing an episode on Finding Paradise, and after that we were doing 2 episodes on Final Fantasy X-2, the girl power sequel to Final Fantasy X about looking for a man.
Not all the time. But
All right, that's fair.
It's a part of it, yeah.
That was an oversimplification on my part, but I also haven't started the game yet because I still gotta finish Finding Paradise. So, but yeah, a few weeks from now, you will get 2 episodes on Final Fantasy X-2 from us. We have plans for the rest of the year, but they're a little bit far off, so I don't want to talk about all of them yet. But if you have questions about our future plans or suggestions for future episodes or whatever you want to ask, please email us retro@rpgfan.com. RPG Fan has also many other ways to interact with us, including message boards, the Facebook page, an Instagram page, a Twitter page, a Discord server, a Twitch channel with something streaming almost every day of the week, and all of those venues are called either RPG Fan or RPG Fancom, and the place where they all begin is rpgfan.com, where you can also find 3 other podcasts: Random Encounter about randomness every 2 weeks, Rhythm Encounter about RPG music every 2 weeks, and Phoenix Edge, a weekly podcast mostly focused on current events. You can review Retro Encounter or those other 3 podcasts on iTunes or Google Play or Podcast Addict or whatever listening venue you choose. Please provide feedback. It does help, and we always appreciate it. And speaking of appreciated feedback, how can you, the listener, reach out to we, the panelists, directly, starting with you, Mark?
So you can find me on Twitter at March of the North, and that's pretty much the best way, or you can message me on the site. I'm just mark@rpgfan.com.
And Alana.
Same. Twitter's probably the best place for me. I am at Alana Hagues on there. If you want to email me, I am alanah@rpgfan.com. And I sometimes lurk in the Discord as well. I'm Alana on there, so just give me a DM or just at me on there. I'm usually in the podcast channel, so yeah, cool to talk.
And for me, if you want to reach out to me directly, the best way to do so is also Twitter. I am at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs other times. I am Monsoon Mike on RPG Fan's Discord, and my email address is sollosi@rpgfan.com. But I also answer all of the emails for retro@rpgfan.com. So Mark and Alana, thanks for guiding me through my first journey through a Sega game that isn't Golden Axe. Oh, I should say my first Sega game from before 1999 that isn't multiplayer, because I have beaten a couple. I have played a couple Dreamcast games, but
Power Stone.
But again, I had such little exposure to Genesis and Saturn that this really, again, I almost felt like I was, I use the phrase like going behind enemy lines, playing the Genesis Mini, and it was it was foreign enough, and I had such old animosity from that time that I think it's an apt analogy. But this was a perfect game to do it because it is a like top class RPG of its era, and it was a blast playing a Phantasy Star game for the first time.
It was great. Yeah. I loved it. Yeah, I really am going to play the rest of the series eventually, but definitely.
It makes me want to go back and play number 1 again and just like slog through that.
Mark, the way you were describing Air Castle in Phantasy Star 1 makes me pretty sure I am not going to revisit Phantasy Star 1 through 3 and just keep my Phantasy Star memories very positive and from a top-down perspective in Phantasy Star 4.
I'll be honest.
But the Switch one's got the maps on it now.
Play the Switch one. You won't get lost. It's actually... And they've adjusted the difficulty a little, so it's not as punishing as it used to be. It is the ideal way to play this. Play Phantasy Star 1.
I think the ideal Phantasy Star experience is playing Phantasy Star 4 and none of the others. Thank you, good night, and good luck.